What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Savvy, and welcome back to the Savvy Show. And in today's episode, we have an SCP that we already covered in the past. However, it's not just one, it's two. And today, it seems like it's going to be a versus battle, but I'm assuming it's just going to be potentially another attempt to take out this indestructible SCP. And if you guys didn't already know, this is SCP-682, the indestructible creature versus Dr. Bright. So these are some of the most popular SCPs. So if you guys happen to somehow never seen any videos about these two SCPs, I cover them both on my channel. I react to both of them multiple times, I believe, in different variations of reaction. So go check them out. It's on the channel. So with that being said, if you guys happen to enjoy this reaction along the way, please remember to smash that like button for me, and also let me know in the comment section below what you guys thought about this SCP, and also hit that bell so you don't miss an upload. So now, without any further ado, let's get this show started. Alrighty, SCP-682 versus Dr. Bright. Let's go.
Another day, another failed attempt to execute SCP-682.
Guillotine?
The infamous hard-to-destroy reptile. The most recent attempt was SCP-272, an old iron nail with the ability to pin people's shadows to the ground and tear them to shreds when different configurations of light makes their shadows go haywire.
Whoa.
Just when it seemed like 272
That's
and
impressive.
a high-powered disco ball might be the thing to
Impressive
win the
indeed.
Foundation's war against the misanthropic lizard, it did what it always did. Pulled out a trump card and ruined everything.
Joker.
Its body evolved a sudden intense bioluminescence that completely eliminated the beast's shadow by overpowering all other light sources in the room.
Wow.
This not only rendered the Foundation's strobe lights utterly useless, but blinded several members of D-Class personnel who were sent in to check on the beast during testing.
Blinded?
This
Dang.
resulted, predictably, in another big fat L for the SCP Foundation.
Let me just leave it alone.
682, 435, Foundation 0.
Be honest.
And nobody was more frustrated than Dr. Samet. Samet was a Foundation greenhorn with big ambitions. Like every jerk at the office, he was less concerned with doing his job right and far more concerned with climbing the corporate ladder. Samet had done all he could cozy up to
Corporate America at its finest.
site directors and even the overseers far above, all with the goal of someday getting a seat at their high table. But as any SCP fans know, they're not just giving out positions on or just under the O5 Council.
Yeah.
To swing something like that, you need to really make an impression. You need to wow them. And what would be a better way to do that than being the person who killed SCP-682?
That's it.
Surely, if he had actually buried that beast, they'd hand him the keys to the proverbial castle. So Dr. Samet had done everything he could to get reassigned to the 682 termination effort. And only now was he realizing just how in over his head he truly was.
For real.
Dr. Samet needed help from a higher power. If he ever hoped of beating SCP-682, the man needed God on his side. Thankfully, they just so happened to have God chilling out in his containment cell in Site-17.
I don't think it will help
Perhaps
him.
through enlisting the help of Earth's divine arbiter,
Maybe,
he could bring
but
an
I don't
end
know.
to the scourge of SCP-682 and rocket himself to success in the process. However, while Dr. Samet may have been arrogant, he wasn't completely delusional. He knew he didn't have the standing to address SCP-343 directly, much less to ask him for a hand in destroying SCP-682. He'd need a go-between, someone with tenure, someone who commanded respect among SCP
Dr.
Foundation
Bright.
staff, as well as the very anomalies they governed. Perhaps someone who was a little bit anomalous themselves. And who better fits this description than the living legend Dr.
Oh,
Jack
God.
Bright. Dr. Samet had, of course, read the Doctor's personnel files. Everybody at the Foundation knew about Dr. Bright's exploits, from what he's done to the various things he isn't allowed to do, which we'll cover in a future video.
Ooh.
He's also dug up the SCP-963 files, the anomalous medallion keeping Dr. Bright alive, whether he likes it or not. While a discussion of the exact nature of the medallion isn't something you'd want to have in front of Dr. Bright himself, after all, it is a touchy subject, you could make the argument that the medallion is the real him. It is where his soul is condemned to
Yep.
spend perhaps the rest of eternity, killing and stealing the body of anyone or anything that touched it.
Kinda sad,
He'd become
but-
an immortal parasite, destined to take the finite lives of others while his own marches on forever. Remind
real.
you of anyone? Dr. Samet got into contact with Dr. Bright and explained his plan. With Bright's help, he'd recruit SCP-343 and bring the very wrath of God down onto the hard-to-destroy reptile.
But what's the plan? What is God gonna do in this plan? Like, you think you're just gonna bring him along and God's just gonna snap his fingers? Like, he has to comply.
Of course, while Dr. Samet naturally assumed himself to be the smartest person in the room, Dr. Bright had a more realistic assessment of the ambitious young Turk's skills. He saw Samet for what he truly was: a climber, a butt kisser, a greedy, power-hungry bureaucrat wearing a lab coat, and he thought that made him a researcher? It was laughable. What Dr. Bright found less funny was Dr. Samet's insistence on calling him SCP-682.
Uh-oh.
There's a lot to know about Dr. Bright, but one thing you should definitely commit to memory is that you should never, under any circumstances, call Dr. Bright SCP-963. And if you were forever entwined with a necklace that doomed you to watch everyone you know and love age and die while depriving you of that same release, you'd probably resent being associated with it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll feel the same way completely. I most likely would be bitter too, who knows? Like honestly, like everyone's dying that you know, that you met in life, and you're just, going on again and again and again and again. Too much.
Dr. Bright did agree to participate in Dr. Samet's harebrained termination scheme, but with a warning that he did not give lightly. If ever Dr. Samet called him 963 again, he would have one of his own loyal team members, nicknamed the Lucky Bunch for their high survival rate compared to other Foundation research teams, shoot him in the foot.
Oh, whoa.
Dr. Bright steeled himself and entered 343's containment cell.
He ain't playing games.
The playful deity had taken the form of the late comedian George Burns, complete with his trademark glasses and half-smoked stogie. They made small talk, with 343 delivering his usual high-handed cryptic parables about his plans for Dr. Bright and everybody else. He even momentarily teased the idea of freeing him from his curse, but Dr. Bright knew better than to buy into these fairy tales. He talked SCP-343 into a cross-test, but didn't tell him it was with 682, or that he was expected to terminate it.
Okay, now that makes sense. Because I was wondering how they're going to convince God to do this. Because, like, if I was God, why would I waste my time to do that?
That was better left as a surprise. Dr. Samet and Dr. Bright stood in the observation area outside the cross-testing chamber. Samet was giddy with excitement and confidence in this new experiment. Dr. Bright's reactions were a hell of a lot more measured. He'd been working at the Foundation long enough now to know that terminating SCP-682 was a fool's errand. The only researchers still intent on trying it were doing so out of stubbornness and ego. And when 343 and 682 were released into the chamber, Dr. Bright's healthy pessimism was more than justified. 682 attacked a nearby door, attempting to breach containment, while 343 looked around, confused and seemingly unable to see anything. When he was ordered to kill 682, he was shocked to learn 682 was even in the room.
What?
He stormed off moments later in a huff, saying,
"He's not one of mine. Deal with him yourself."
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Bright was unsurprised.
I was surprised that he couldn't see him, though. That's kind of weird. But I figured God doesn't want to even, go against this dude. It's not his problem.
Dr. Samet was shocked and furious.
I wouldn't be.
How could this have failed? They literally had God on their side. This setback would seriously compromise his chances of rising through the ranks, unless he found a quick way to make the best out of a bad situation and save face. Without even thinking, he turned to Dr. Bright and said, "Fine, it didn't work, doesn't matter. Get yourself ready, 963, you're going in." So it was decided.
The hell?
Dr. Bright himself would face off with
You
SCP-682
just
in
listening to him?
SCP-343's place. Dr. Bright was a betting man. He loved a good game of chance, and he estimated that his odds of succeeding were exceptionally low.
Why would you do
What
it?
would be the point in refusing? Even if he couldn't kill SCP-682, perhaps he would get lucky and the reptile would kill him instead. So many enticing possibilities.
True.
Dr. Bright left to prepare for the coming battle. And because nobody would say that Dr. Bright wasn't a man of his word, he had one of his assistants shoot Dr. Samet in the foot. A few days later, Dr. Bright, Dr. Samet, now in a wheelchair while he recovered from his unfortunate foot injury, and a collection of other researchers, including Dr. Sophia Light, were convened in a conference room, planning out their assault on SCP-682. A mechanical staff of sorts was laying on the table in front of him, a kind of powerful taser capable of firing out painful bolts of electricity. It would be the only object Dr. Bright carried into the chamber with him that day.
Really?
But only as a way of getting 682's attention, not as a weapon.
Okay.
The true weapon was SCP-963. The plan was simple. SCP-682 would eat Dr. Bright, and the power of SCP-963 would destroy it from within. As anyone with an awareness of 963's anomalous properties could tell you, for most living beings, touching the medallion results in immediate brain death, followed by the consciousness of Dr. Bright inhabiting your mindless body. If they could get this phenomenon to work for SCP-682, perhaps with Dr. Bright's mind in SCP-682's body, Could they now end the life of this wretched beast once and for all?
Why can't you just let him touch the medallion? Wouldn't that be easier? I'm just saying. Why does he have to swallow him completely?
Like with all matters involving SCP-682 and Dr. Bright, it was most likely not going to be so simple. When Dr. Bright entered the test chamber with 682, as Dr. Samet and the others watched from the observation room, the results were sudden and violent. Dr. Bright zapped the monster with his electrostaff, and it came charging for him, a terrible fury of teeth and claws. Dr. Bright had died so many times, and yet he couldn't even recall many experiences more unpleasant than this. And as 682's interior flesh met SCP-963, Dr. Bright woke up in the middle of a strange new place. There was a man standing over him that looked oddly familiar, except for the strange chainmail hauberk he was wearing.
What?
When Dr. Bright found his feet, he recognized the man. It was a D-class. In fact, the first body he'd ever inhabited after his soul fused with SCP-963.
Whoa.
But he wasn't alone here. There were so many people, all of them wearing the same chainmail and carrying the same electrostaffs that Dr. Bright had carried into the chamber
A different
with him.
dimension?
Little by little, he recognized every single one of the faces. They were all people whose bodies he'd taken, whose lives he'd cut short to further his own. He looked around and saw more bizarre sights. A grand castle, structured like a deranged Escher painting. And up above, drowning out the sky, was a great reptilian behemoth, like SCP-682 on steroids, made entirely from barbecue sauce.
What
the
the
D-Class
heck?
broke the surreal news.
This is a
None
weird
of this
dream?
was real. It was a fantasy his mind had concocted to help him cope with his consciousness bonding with SCP-682.
He bonded
a more
with him.
palatable way of perceiving his new reality. And if he ever wanted to get out and be himself again, he would need to fight and conquer the beast within.
Okay, so this is like an example of probably everyone else, like all those people that he inhabited in the past. They are probably in, Dr. Bright right now, before he actually got into SCP-682. But now that I'm assuming SCP-682 swallowed Dr. Bright, he's among the vessels that he took in the past, and now he has to defeat the beast, which is somehow, some way, defeat SCP-682 while being inside of him. So that's gonna be kind of cool. Or they might have a battle of wills, like who's gonna reign supreme to take over, or who will be the #1 conscious in this union of two entities colliding.
Dr. Bright joined forces with his past victims, including one former Level 2 researcher, Damien Smith. Together, using their electrostaffs, Bright and his army of mental constructs blasted the great monster in the sky from the safe confines of the castle. However, things weren't quite as safe as Dr. Bright had first imagined. The massive creature descended upon them, tearing the castle to shreds with its huge claws. The construct of Damon Smith was devoured in the process. Dr. Bright's brief illusion of victory was soon stifled by one immutable fact. You could not defeat SCP-682. He retreated from the monster into the darkness of his own nightmares. From there, he woke up.
Wait, what?
Dr. Bright was in a hospital bed, the medallion attached to a new body after 682's body had rejected it. He was greeted by Dr. Sophia Light and a member of the O5 Council.
So this dude could literally reject the medallion. SCP-682 is kind of, I wouldn't say busted, but it's a weird one.
Dr. Bright had effectively been gone for days. When he asked what happened on the outside, he was told that 682 had entered a 36-hour coma before growing massive claws and tunneling out of containment.
Okay, at least there was some ramifications of him touching the medallion and rejecting it, because regular people would just instantly die. So for him to have nothing going on with himself, come on, man. Even though he's adapts to everything, he should have some drawback.
Caused a massive breach, though strangely, upon breaking out of the chamber, it only attacked one researcher. And in unrelated news, Dr. Samet had been taken off the 682
Did he attack Dr.
case.
Samet?
It didn't take long for things to return to normal for Dr. Bright. Well,
That's
as normal as life can be when you're a man as strange as him. But while few would notice it, 682 was left altered. It had taken a souvenir from Dr. Bright, fragments of the consciousness of Damon Smith. It felt his pain, his fear. It tasted it, dissected it, and now understood it. And when the opportunity presented itself once more, as it always did, he couldn't wait to inflict it on others. Now go check out SCP-682 weighs SCP...
I was going to assume that he might act differently towards, the SCP Foundation because he feels the pain of, a past employee. But I guess, it could work that way. With that being said, though, let me know what you guys thought about the conclusion for this battle in the comment section below. And if you guys did like the reaction, please let me know by smashing that like button. And also smash that sub button, join the family, and hit that bell so you can stay plugged for each and every upload. But now, unfortunately, that concludes today's episode. However, I'll catch you guys on the next one.